I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Hey everybody, it is hot in Seattle today, but I don't mind it. I kind of like being outside in the hot weather. One thing about me, the update here is that it's my 1-year anniversary of going fully freelance. So for those that don't know, I was unemployed for 6 months and started this podcast. I'd been thinking about this podcast for a while, but since I had quite a lot of time, I started the podcast and then was trying to figure out what to do with my life. And I got this freelance gig for one of my clients, and it was for 3 months. And I was like, oh, I'll just do that for a little bit, and then I'll figure out what the heck I'm going to do with my life. And then I got another client, and then that client extended, and it's now been a year. So I'm super, super grateful. I just posted on Instagram and LinkedIn, all that. But I've been able to do festivals and conferences and weddings and work at a restaurant and MC. I worked on a TV show. It's just like so cool. So I'm excited about that. My other update in my personal life, I'm doing this self-help book called Calling in the One, 7 Weeks to Find the Love of Your Life. I've done it before. I did it in 2020, and I'm on week 2. So check back in about 5 weeks, guys. But no, it's kind of like guided journaling, and it's about every kind of relationship in your life. So whether that's with your family or work, it's a lot of kind of self-reflection. So that's my personal update. Let's get into the news and introduce my guest, because I am sitting here with Dominique Alex, the CEO of Mary's Place. Hi, Dominique.
Hello.
Have you done any self-help books?
I've not done any self-help books, but it sounds pretty amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
And congratulations on your 1 year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have you ever done freelance?
No.
Yeah, it's terrifying. As much as we talk about like the American dream and building your own business, the systems are really not set up for it. It's challenging. I mean, I'm grateful, but it's challenging.
Yeah, a lot of networking, a lot of...
Yeah, well, even the small stuff. Like I found out something else I was supposed to do with the state of Washington I had no idea about. And like,
oh, yeah. Paperwork?
Yeah. And then getting business insurance and kind of the process of that. It's like all these weird things. And then, yeah, it's just tough. But anyway, you've not been a freelancer. I'll tell you what you've done. You are the CEO of Mary's Place. And before that, you were their chief program officer. You've held leadership roles at Children's Home Society of Washington, which is now known as AKIN, and worked as a Head Start education specialist, an autism behavior-based therapist, and was an adjunct faculty member at Goddard College.
There it is.
Beyond this kind of work-life stuff, what else should people know about you?
I am a Seattleite and born and raised here right in the central area of Seattle. So watched a lot of change, but this is a beautiful place to call home. And I have a family that I am raising here. So my husband and I have 4 wonderful children spanning between the ages of 14 and 23. So
wow.
Doing a whole lot there. And I have a new grandbaby who's 6 months.
Congrats.
And so we've got that cradle to post-college and learning a lot and enjoying the ride. And this has been an awesome community to grow up in with a family that is supportive and a beautiful community that helped raise me.
Yeah, I love that. Well, for those that don't know, can you give us a little bit of a synopsis of what Mary's Place is and what they do?
Mary's Place has been around since 1999, and we started off as really responding to the crisis of women that were experiencing homelessness. So in the beginning, we started by having a women's day center to respond to that need and providing a safe place for women to come to that were experiencing homelessness to get the resources that they need, think about housing, building community, and just the hygiene items, right? Or taking a shower and just having that love and dignity that we all have and deserve.
Yeah. And currently, so that's kind of like what it used to be.
That's how we started.
Yeah. What does it look like now?
Yeah. So as we've progressed through time and really kind of evolved with the growing crisis in our community, we started to see those same women show up with children. And so that started in about 2008. And over the years, we, welcomed the children in, but also there was nowhere for them to go at night. And so while we did not have the intention of having overnight shelter, Mary's Place quickly became a response to that problem was to open up overnight shelter. And so we did that through rotating churches and really leaned into our community to think about how do we respond to this crisis that's really pretty invisible. So by 2011, we were doing that. And
well, sorry, you say invisible because families, we don't typically see them on the streets or where we would the general public. They're a little bit more in hiding, right?
Yeah. So families are really afraid of losing their children. And so having them be visible is really frightening for parents. And so often they may be in a quiet cul-de-sac. They may be hiding in a parking lot that's not lit up just to keep their kids safe and just to continue to do life until they can find that stable place. And so being able to come into a safe place at night and get those wraparound support services that we now provide has been really an awesome opportunity to walk alongside families. After we started serving women and their children, we also started serving dads. And so we really are all inclusive and pets.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's the evolution of Mary's Place. But we had a little girl that one day had her dad with her and said, "Why can't my dad come inside?" And
That breaks my heart.
being responsive to really the need again, right? And keeping families whole and together is really what it's all about. And so today that really looks like sometimes multi-generational families because we all come from a different family makeup. While a majority of our families are run by single head of household women, we also see dads and we see grandparents that are caregivers as well. And so bringing people in as a whole family is really what it's all about here.
Yeah, you're doing incredible work. I found out about you through my time at PSBJ because you took over, how long ago was it? 2 years?
It's been 2 years now.
Years.
So, and one thing I want to add too about Mary's Place is that we have been known for shelter. But one of the things that we also do is that we're really approaching this with a three-pronged approach. And so it's more than shelter here. We also are doing a mobile outreach program as well as prevention. So if you're in your car in your tent and maybe shelter is not the best option for you, we're moving people from their cars and tents directly into a housing solution. And then our other option is really thinking about moving upstream, keeping families in their hard-won homes, preventing that trauma on children, and giving that rental assistance and figuring out what it takes to stabilize a family. So it isn't just thinking about shelter. While that's a really important piece to solving this crisis, if we can prevent it, if we can be more responsive in a way that fits the family's needs by using that mobile outreach team, we're really trying to think more holistically about how we respond to families' needs.
I think that's smart, holistically and going upstream. Can you give us a sense of the size and scope of Mary's Place? I feel like it's one of the biggest ones, but that might just be my mindset. Like, how many families are you serving, for example?
Yeah, so we are one of the largest family providers in this county. And we currently have 500 emergency family beds in our shelters. We have one in Seattle and one on the east side in Bellevue. We also are serving about 700 families in our outreach program. So just as many families in our shelters and our outreach program. So the impact is pretty big when you think about those two programs. And then we're closely short of 400 families that we're serving in our prevention program. So the impact is pretty good.
Huge,
and big, right? Definitely. And then we have a family center that is providing resources every day. Our mobile outreach team is out of that hub, but they're out near Franklin High School in the south end of Seattle. So if you need diapers, wipes, you need childcare resources, which we work with Bright Sparks, or you're looking for a mental health resource, or you are experiencing homelessness and need some tangible assistance right then, or technology assistance, so you can have a computer lab there. So lots of good things are happening. And so the impact is even wider than we think because families are also dropping through there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're doing really good work, and we're going to hear a lot more about it in our articles today. But one more question before we get into that. Why did you personally get into this line of work? I hear it might have had something to do with your family, but I want to hear kind of from you why that happened. Yeah,
my parents are a big catalyst to my inspiration of landing where I did. My mom was a nurse administrator with King County Detox. And so for a long time, she was helping people that had mental health and substance use disorders kind of really work through their treatment at that very first phase to get them to detox and get them more stable. And my father still is currently running the Matt Talbot Center, which is a drug and alcohol recovery program, also has transitional housing right here in the Belltown area in downtown Seattle. So my life growing up as a kiddo,
the family. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had an opportunity. Back then you went to work with your parents quite a bit more than today. And so I often was running errands, working at the front desk with my dad at the Matt Talbot Center, playing cards with the guys. And then also with my mom, I was actually at the detox center at times. I probably wouldn't allow kids there now, but got to meet people, or, my parents knew a lot of people on the streets. So also as you're driving through Pioneer Square, walking through there, we'd know people by common names.
Yeah.
So that was my life experience growing up, and loving on people, building relationships as your neighbors, and in some places, people became family, to be honest. And so that's the infancy of my career, I would say, and like my life's work.
Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like from an early age, they both normalized it and humanized the people experiencing homelessness.
That's right.
Okay, our top stories. We're obviously going to lean a little bit more towards homelessness, but we do have a couple other stories. So the first one is Housing First program reveals some positive data, and that's here in King County. Our next story is about some legislation that's being proposed in Congress to hopefully protect the homeless. Our third story is about a local Seattle youth shelter who has closed a shelter and their CEO has stepped down. And our last story is about Starbucks' new in-office policy. So the first one is about this Housing First program. So it's called King County's Health Through Housing Initiative. The program started in 2020, and the goal was to help chronic homelessness, which we just talked about in the last episode with Chad McKay. And that's those people that have spent years or decades on the street. And they looked at some data. So in last year, of these residents, 67% were experiencing mental health disorder, 36 had a physical disability, and 52 had a substance use disorder. So we've got some health issues with these residents. And after a year of giving them housing, they saw less visits to the ER, less days in the hospital, more people receiving Apple Health Care. And all of that obviously eventually does save money for the taxpayer, if you're thinking about that, because of these less visits to the ER, because we know that that's really expensive.
Absolutely.
How is this being funded? It's a 0.1% sales tax that's being used to fund a lot of these programs in the affordable housing. I saw something in here, article is that once they move into permanent housing, it sounds like that's a second step. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Then they do eventually pay a sliding scale of rent based on their income, but that's for later, like kind of once they're on their feet. Mm-hmm. Those were kind of my takeaways from the article. I wanted to kind of hear from you. This is about housing first, meaning they don't have to have a job before they have a house. They don't have to be clean before they have a house. It was really like, this is the first step, no preconditions. Why is housing more important than anything else when you're trying to help? And is that kind of part of Mary? Obviously, it's part of Mary's mission too, Mary's Place.
Yeah, so Mary's Place does lean into the Housing First model, just so everyone knows. But for us, Housing First is really keeping the housing as the main goal. When you have housing, it is a lot easier to think about the other things. For the person that is living in their car with their kids, it is really hard to work on your health care, think about childcare, how you're going to get to your job, have your hygiene, like just taking a shower every day without having a roof over your head. That's a basic human need.
I mean, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I feel like
right.
We all kind of learned that. You can't focus on anything else before you have your needs.
Yes. And so that's really that idea of like without a house, without having the food, those Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? Those are the primary focus of why Housing First is so important. It doesn't mean at Mary's Place that we do not work with families to think about what else can keep you in your housing.
Okay.
So while families are on their journey and we are focused on that housing, we're also setting goals with families to ask them, what is it going to take to get you to housing? But also, what is it going to take you to sustain that housing? And so for us, that means that we're providing a lot of wraparound supports. And so I think when you talk about people having healthcare, we have navigators that are like, hey, do you have a doctor? Do you have healthcare? So those kinds of questions are asked. And while we're working on your Housing First goals, we're also making sure you're signed up for your healthcare. You find a primary care doctor. We're making that connection. And so once you do exit into that housing solution that's right for you, then you have all of those other things that help you and your family stay in your house.
Mm-hmm. I volunteered, and this was so long ago, I think it was at Mary's Place. But my volunteer role was to help people on, this is a long time ago, but on Craigslist find housing. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, like what's your budget? Because these people had jobs.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to see how hard it was to find a rental for an affordable rate for somebody that has a regular job. Yeah. So I definitely relate to some of this. I also, when I graduated college, I had finished an internship and I didn't really have a job. And I had to call my parents to pay my rent. And I just remember that moment being like, if I didn't have a relationship with my parents, like it is so easy for people to be in this situation, even if somebody wants to work or has a job.
Absolutely. And I would say that most of our families are working one job, if not multiple jobs. So this is not a matter of whether people are working, whether people have a desire to have the job to keep their family in their home or to have a home. It's not affordable to that point you were saying. Like, Seattle is very expensive to live. It's not just about the house, right? It's like how much food is. We've seen inflation skyrocket, things like diapers and formula, the gas we put in our cars, right?
Yeah.
But many people are just one paycheck away from becoming homeless, right? You could have a crisis like your car breaks down and you're using that to take your kids to school and get to work. And now you're choosing between, do I pay my rent or do I get my car fixed? Do I pay for the food in my house or do I pay my rent? So all of that is like a domino effect. So most people are just that one crisis away.
I believe it. I think I have a lot of empathy for that situation. But you'd mentioned on another podcast I listened to about kind of what's changed in Seattle specifically from maybe 2019 to now. I think you'd said that you'd hit your goal, which was no kid sleeps outside or something like that. And you had maybe a little bit of a wait list, but talk to me about the numbers now. What are you seeing now?
Yeah, so prior to about 2019, we could ensure that no child sleeps outside. And so what that meant is we operate the King County Emergency Family Intake Line. So when folks call in for a shelter bed, Mary's Place operates that, and we can tell you amongst all of the family providers who have county beds, how many of those folks can come inside. So in 2019, anyone who called, we could bring inside.
Wow.
So pretty achievable.
That's
back
very
in 2019 cool. Pre-pandemic. If you fast forward to today, we're in a very different place. And so right now we're seeing anywhere between 50 callers and 70 callers seeking family emergency shelter today.
And how many can you take in?
And out of that, every day, we're only able to bring anywhere between 1 and 3 of those families in.
Oh, I just got chills. That's so heartbreaking. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you see that, I don't know, do you see that changing? Do you see that getting better? Or is this just kind of the nature of both the USA right now and Seattle?
Yeah, our macro context is very challenging right now. And what we have seen, if we look at kind of post-pandemic, let's just say in the last year and a half, during COVID, we saw a lot of additional resources flowing into our community. So there were decisions to provide rental assistance. We had additional food stamps like on people's SNAP benefits. And, there were a lot of additional community resources that were also, people were stepping up to just like provide food for families and people in our community. Well, all of those things have dried up.
Yep.
And so we're post-pandemic, right? I'm putting quotations in the air because really, like, COVID hasn't disappeared. And what's happened is like our economy has really shifted. Things are more expensive. Rents continuing to increase. Jobs are harder to find, right? So all of those things are really impacting. Eviction rates are up, skyrocketed. And so what we have seen is that number just continue to build. And based on what people are projecting, we are really anticipating that we are going to see way more need than we are seeing now. And there is not enough resources in our community to do that. As a matter of fact, we're actually tightening up the resources and losing resources in our community. So it's a challenging time. But one of the things I would say for Mary's Place, why we have not just focused on shelter, we're focusing on that 3-pronged approach of shelter outreach and prevention, is because we know there's not enough shelter beds. We have to be responsive. So we might send our mobile outreach team. But most importantly, how do we keep people in their homes? Particularly if they're in like affordable housing or they have a voucher that they need to stay there because it's affordable for them, but they may have hit a hard spot. Yeah. So for us, it's like, let's attack this crisis in a multi-pronged way so that we can ensure that we are not having so much inflow.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about a little bit more about funding in a minute, but I want to move on to our next article, which kind of hits on the legislation piece. We talked about the impact of our macro universe in Seattle, and legislation is a piece of that. So U.S. Representative Pramila Jayapal introduced legislation to Congress last week that would prohibit federal agencies from removing homeless people from federal land if they have nowhere else to go. Basically saying you can't come in. It's called housing, not handcuffs. Please don't come in and arrest these people if they're on federal land, they have nowhere to go. This comes after there was a Supreme Court ruling that essentially allowed states to pass any law they wanted almost to make it illegal to live outside. And it sounds like this representative is trying to combat that even ever so slightly. I liked a quote in there that was, homelessness isn't a failure of the individual, it's a failure of the system. That really hits home. I have some people in my life that don't necessarily agree with that. Mm-hmm. And Chad in the last episode talked about like people, especially addicted to drugs, which I know is not your typical demographic, but mm-hmm. they don't have agency. And there's this myth that like homeless people that are experiencing homelessness are lazy. I mean, there's so many things where it's like blaming the individual. And I think having, that story I just told where I'm like, I feel like that could have, if I didn't have the parents I had, that could have happened. Right. So anyway, do you have initial thoughts on this legislation before I ask the other questions?
Yeah. This is a tricky one because what I think oftentimes things get boiled down to an individual issue, because when you're driving off the freeway, when you're going into your place of business, you often see the individual circumstance versus like the larger macro systemic issue that's really happening. Really more responsible for like, how can we prevent a lot of these things from happening in the first place? And so I have those people in my life too that often see things as more of an individual issue and how can we fix this right now? This is what I see every single day. Mm-hmm. And I have respect for that because I know it's challenging. Yeah. And I would say that this is not going to solve the larger issue if we continue to look at the individual. To put people in jail because they are sleeping on the street costs more money for taxpayers. It is not really fixing the issue. It's really more of a Band-Aid approach, as opposed to saying, how do we help prevent this? Or how do we really comprehensively approach helping someone from more of a policy perspective? How do we allocate resources? How do we make sure that it isn't a one-size-fits-all situation and support the system to change what we're seeing in an individual manifestation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, because I feel for some of the business owners that have, a lot of people experiencing homelessness outside of their business, and maybe mm-hmm. there's damage or whatever. So I think we're both, like, everyone's on the same page that this is an issue. I think there's some disagreement on how to solve that.
Yes, I think we all have, like, one of the things I have been sitting in some business meetings, sitting with different people with very different perspectives on, like, how do we solve for this? I think we all have the same North Star, is that we all want to end family homelessness or homelessness in general, mm-hmm. right? And I think if that's our North Star, like, how do we do that together and think more broadly, right? Than just saying, let's sweep it, let's just get it out of the visible eye, because that's really not going to solve and sustain it. For someone that may need treatments or someone that may need a mental health support that's sustainable for them and meets them where they're at, that needs to be approached in a larger way. Mm-hmm. But also, it's a lot of times people need housing that's affordable. They need to be able to eat every day those foods that like are good for them and their bodies, right? Like, but when you throw people in jail because they're sleeping on the street, that is a huge barrier to their success in life. It's mm-hmm. hard to find a job. It's hard to get back on your feet. It's hard to find housing with a conviction on your record. And so those kinds of things do not help our society. And I also often think about, this is our community, and it's also a reflection of whom we are. Mm-hmm. And so what are we doing to make it better and reflect the community we want?
Yeah, agreed. One more question on this one, because this is about legislation. Is there mm-hmm. a piece of legislation that really made a huge impact at Mary's Place, maybe for the better or for the worse? Like, how is that kind of intertwined?
There are so many legislative pieces that I think have really been supportive. So anything that has supported families has been helpful for Mary's Place. So when I think about Apple Health, that is really helpful to make sure people are getting their health care taken care of and it's affordable and high quality, right? They just started supporting doula services for our pregnant moms. That's an additional resource that was not really attainable without some additional support. Childcare, there is a homelessness grace period that DCYF had incorporated a few years back. And so that allows for families time to present paperwork, but allows their child to get quickly into childcare so they can work, go to school, or do those work, thinking about their economic mobility, right? And so any of those components, I would also say that Washington has the Working Families Tax Credit, and so that provides a tax refund to eligible residents. Those types of things really help build that safety net that families really don't have, just to make the basics meet in life. And so when that crisis hits, that they don't become homeless, but they have something that says, okay, I can catch my breath a little bit.
Yeah.
So those things are really helpful. But anything concerning families that's in legislation is helping keep families from being outside and keeping every child off the street.
That's a good way to look at it, is that it's families in general, not
That's
just
right.
specific legislation for people experiencing homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, our third story is we're kind of shifting into youth and funding, sort of. There's this organization, Youth Care, and that's a Seattle youth homelessness nonprofit organization. Two stories in this segment, which is that the CEO stepped down, and also they had to close a shelter. It was a 12-bed youth shelter for undocumented and unaccompanied youth. There was some uncertainty around federal funding, which I don't think any of us are surprised by that. And it sounds like that was the reason. They'd had some trouble the past year financially. There'd been some layoffs. So the CEO, DeGale Cooper, she stepped down and they closed this shelter. The article kind of talks about some frustration where they feel like she did it maybe too soon, or the whole organization did it too soon, because they're anticipating a lack of funding versus kind of coming up with some creative solutions and still serving them. But I brought this up because I want to talk about funding. We talked a little bit about it, but how is Mary's Place funded? If you can break it down between like grants and donors, what does that look like?
Mary's Place is funded. We have about $24 million budget. And so out of that budget, very big place.
Yeah.
Making great impact by the generosity of our community. But we have about 20% of our budget is a public resource. So that could look like a state or, local KCRHAs, different cities, as well as we've had some federal funding as well. So that is kind of that makeup of the public component. 13% of our budget is from a corporate entity. So just want to put that out there for
So like corporate donors, like
corporate donors,
banks and stuff. Oh, that's great.
So banks, Amazon,
Yeah.
Microsoft. When you think about the corporations that are here in our community that can give us generously, that is.
Are you guys listening? Yeah.
And we would love to expand that piece of the pie. So we're very, very grateful for folks out there. And then the rest of it is made up of individuals and foundations. And so majority of Mary's Places
Really?
revenue that comes in here is from the generous population of our very own community and individuals.
Wow, that's very cool. I did not know that.
Yeah. And just for perspective, most nonprofits like us, that pie is really flipped, right? You see anywhere between 50 and 85% of folks funding being a public resource. So Mary's Place is very unique in that way. And
it's always been like that?
It's always been like that. We've actually grown our public pie a little bit since I've been here in the last 4 years, but it's predominantly been the generosity of our community.
So when you think about federal funding, in my mind, I thought that was going to really hit you guys a lot more. I mean, obviously it still would. But if we lose some of this federal funding, maybe you've lost some already, what does that change about Mary's Place? How do you look at that strategically of how do you continue to have a thriving organization?
Yeah, so for Mary's Place, we are not going to be as impacted as the rest of our community. We have already seen some of those impacts across the nonprofit sector, where some people have had to close programs, as you've mentioned. They've had to make really strategic decisions and do some of that contingency planning. But for us, we have done some contingency planning because, as I mentioned, we have a very small bit of some of our funding that is federal, that is passed through King County Regional Homeless Authority. So for us at Mary's Place, we are doing that, but I think more widely, it's working with our partners to understand how they're being impacted and how can we collectively come together so that as beds are lost in our county, as programs are having to reduce because of that, how are we going to help fill those gaps together and create policies, put a requests to different people around like, this is how we can get our greatest impact. That's the goal, to serve as many families as we can with the greatest impact as long as we can and need to.
Yeah. Have you seen any decrease in volunteers? Because I know that is a big part of your business, right?
It's a big part of our business, yes. And Volunteers have been the very fabric of Mary's Place since its infancy. I would say we have not seen a decrease in that.
Okay, that's good. I don't want to frame that negatively. I should have said, have you seen an increase? Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things I love is there's a lot of young people that are actually wanting to volunteer and be a part of the solution. There's a couple schools that so Lake Washington Girls Middle School had a strategic partnership through their service learning program. Shout out to Dr. Connor, who's leading that program there. As the head of school, but that's a part of their curriculum is to do service learning. But they had groups come out and help support at our Allen Family Center and at our warehouse, creating snack packs and doing all kind of wonderful things like diapers, put together for families. So I think it's becoming more diverse and like people want to be a part of the solutions. We've had legal clinics that have been pro bono that people are giving their time to support financial literacy classes. So it's great that there's a lot. We see sports teams and high schoolers coming in to serve meals. So really cool business groups. So all of that is always welcome. I love that corporations give their staff time on the clock to come and volunteer.
Yeah,
so Mary's Place will take you.
Yeah, if you're looking for someone to volunteer.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to do our last article, which is about Starbucks. So speaking of big corporations.
Yes.
Beginning September 29th, the corporate employees have to work 4 days in the office. It is currently 3 days in the office, so they're going up to 4 days. And earlier this year, just as a reminder, they required anyone at a VP level or above had to relocate to Seattle or Toronto. Now, in addition to the 4 days a week, they're also saying people that are, quote, support center people leaders, which I don't know what that means, but okay, if that's them, then they have to also relocate to Seattle or Toronto within the next 12 months. And they're saying, hey, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. You can get this cash payment and opt out. And they're like, this is all about culture. And I'm like, this is a layoff. This is a secret layoff. Everyone's been doing it. Just be honest. That's how I feel. And also get out of here with culture, Mr. Brian Nickel, who he wasn't required to relocate. If anybody remembers the story, he's from Orange County. And he said, nope, I'm going to take my private jet to Seattle back and forth. And so the audacity for him to be like, everybody needs to come to Seattle. The article does say that he now has a residence in Seattle. That reads to me as he bought a house here. But anyway, can you tell I have opinions on this? I don't hate in office. Like I like going in. I just get frustrated when the reasons are culture. And I'm like, and like outdated ideas of productivity. And I think about how it affects mothers and parents and people that are older and taking care of kids and their parents. And there's just so much more to this conversation than go back to how it used to be. Anyway, that is the article. For you, Dominique, well, I guess, do you have strong opinions? You don't have to share them.
This is so hot topic.
It is a hot topic.
As we've come out of COVID and folks are being asked to come back to work, right?
Yeah.
So for me, every day when I come into work, when I first came here 4 years ago to Mary's Place, we're in the downtown area for most of my work. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so weird to get to work in 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, it was kind of eerie, right? Mm-hmm. Well, fast forward to today, it takes me a good 30, sometimes 45 minutes. So from that perspective, I'm like, ugh.
Which is the length of most of my podcasts. Take a listen on your drive to work.
There you go.
Yeah.
And, but I will tell you that our staff never had an option to opt out of coming in physically.
Yeah.
And the work that staff does is so incredibly hard. And we have, I think, greatly benefited from being together and having those opportunities to collaborate and build the culture that we really want to see and share with the people that we're serving.
Yeah, very different line of work. And I think
Absolutely.
different rules apply. I want to hear a little bit more about the relationship between employment and homelessness. And you had mentioned, we had talked about like a lot of them do have a job or are trying to get a job. Do you have any data for us or stories about kind of that relationship between employment and homelessness?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, most of our families are at least working one job, if not multiple.
Yeah.
So usually employment is not the issue for families experiencing homelessness.
I think most people would be surprised to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, because as you were talking about earlier, like some people may look at homelessness and think people are lazy or they're not working hard enough. And quite frankly, some people are so overworked, they're not actually able to spend time with their families. They're not able to engage in other ways because they're going from one job to the next and then home to sleep. And if they're getting enough sleep at night, right? So, but I will tell you that some of the opportunities that we really work with our families on are, what are your dreams and goals? Because oftentimes no one's ever even asked our families that. Or what are your hopes and dreams for your child? And I think building off of that really helps us set up those economic opportunities that would advance their, life as it stands. So some people are going back to school. Some people are going to training programs. Some people are building their resumes that really can bolster their opportunities. We do interviews and job fairs here. So I often think about what are the opportunities that maybe some of us have a relationship with a family friend that someone says, oh, let me give you this opportunity, right? And that's not, our families don't typically have community in that way. And sometimes not even in connection with their own family. So they're just trying to get one foot in front of the other. So creating those opportunities, thinking about digital literacy, right? Thinking about financial literacy. And so people just even know how to manage a budget, right? Have a bank account. Some people have never had a bank account. So working a job and cashing your check and having a big fat fee come off the top of that because you don't have a bank account.
Oh,
those
gosh.
simple things like put more money in your pocket. So that's the goal of partnering with the families that we have to, I think, help them not only stabilize, but thrive and even think about home ownership.
Yeah. I didn't even think about the networking piece. I think about a lot of my jobs that I've had, especially in this past year of freelance, is through people I know, through LinkedIn. And if I'm somebody that's experiencing homelessness, I don't have that network most likely. Yeah,
No,
really
absolutely.
good point. Okay, we're going to close out the episode with my final question for you, which I feel really does apply in your world, because I want to ask, how do you get motivated when you don't feel like doing anything? And I think with you, this is a heavy topic that you're dealing with. I'm sure there's a lot of light moments and great accomplishments, but how do you stay so motivated to do this hard work that you do?
I often times today feel like everything is grim. So you get up, you're
I'm glad you say that. That is so honest, because I'm yes, I do too sometimes. Yes.
Yes. And you're telling a story and then it leads to another thing. And then somehow, between war and the economy and our government. But there's a few things that help keep me grounded. First and foremost, my family keeps me grounded, and my kids, they provide a lot of hope, but also the kids in our shelters, in our programs. I'll just so often sit in a lobby when the bus drops off kids, and to have them come in with so much glee and joyfulness and light. That is really what keeps me going every single day and really grounded in our mission. But I also would say that it is the generosity of this community and stepping up when other things are falling to the wayside or there's so much uncertainty. And our board is part of that. Our staff showing up every day to say yes to this mission and to do this work alongside us in partnership with our families. And then the families getting their keys.
Yeah, I bet.
How cool is that, right?
Yeah.
You come in at your lowest point and you partner with the families and they go home to a new place, and we often don't ever see them again. And we say, don't come back, just come back, say hi. But they really stabilize. And so that's the awesome part of this work. And so leaning into those stories and creating the boundary on all the noise outside.
Yeah. Challenging work, but very rewarding, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sitting down with me. I know talking about this topic can be challenging for a lot of people, and I appreciate you being really honest and sharing a lot of the information, and I hope people listening get something out of it and continue these conversations with their peers and their colleagues and their friends. So thank you, Dominique, for hosting me here at Mary's Place and for taking the time.
Thank you, Rachel.
This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.